Christian or Not is a production of Revive Studios.
We have put out episodes here on Christian or Not going over the life of Isaac Newton and John Rockefeller, and we asked the question whether you agreed with us on whether these guys were Christians or not. And so this is our first episode where we hear from you. Did we get it right? Did we get it wrong? Find out on this feedback episode of Christian or Not.
Okay, here we are. Troy, how are you feeling?
I am feeling great. What are you talking about, Mark? It's a great day. It has been many months since we recorded these episodes originally, and so it is super nice to finally get back to the feedback episodes we were talking about months ago, and we're actually finally doing them.
Yep. Yeah. So, we've been in production for a while, which is just a fancy way of saying we were too busy with other things to actually edit the episodes. But we've recorded this, so we're on July.
Give it some credit. Producing a podcast takes a while. For example, the little music you hear was created by Mark and his wife. Like, they made that soundtrack itself, and which is really cool because we have other shows that we, used soundtracks that were copyright free, and now we get hit by random copyright infringement things, even though they were copyright free. That will never happen with this little cool intro that Mark and his wife created.
And most credits go to my wife because she's the only one that actually played an instrument on it. She played the violin, the sort of like pizzicato violin you hear. That's her playing, and it was me, pretending to mirror that. But yeah, it's been like 7 months, I think, since we recorded both of these episodes that we're talking about today, Newton and Rockefeller. And we're excited. I mean, the show's out there. People are engaging, so that's already like, always a bit of a thing. Like, we make something that we think is interesting, but do you actually think it's interesting? And do you listen to us? And do you comment? But you did. So we're really excited about that. And I just want to kick it off here with a comment about Troy that someone shared with us. The first comment that we talk about, Josiah, thank you for listening, watching, commenting. And he says, what Mike Winger is to problematic charismatics, Troy is to old dead people. So
I appreciate that. It sounds funny. Maybe it's arrogant to like that comment. I don't know. But I was like, thank you. That's the goal around here. Let those Mike Winger, let him take care of the today guys with his 6-hour videos. I will go after dead people who can't fight back. That's the plan.
I mean, you've put it in a wrong way, because the reason we've actually said this before, like as soon as we started pitching the show to people, they were like, oh, you got to do this guy, you got to do that guy. Like, I mean, it's obvious Trump came up, but we're just saying we don't do people that are alive because we don't know what's going to happen in their lives. We can't really say anything about anyone that's still around.
Yeah, if you want to know
Yeah,
if somebody's a Christian or not and they're still alive, go ask them. Right?
it's a fair point.
You
Yeah.
you can send them an email, and that might sound really silly, but somebody who asked Benjamin Franklin a couple months before he died is writing a letter to him and asked him, and most of our thoughts on what Benjamin Franklin knows about God comes from that letter, like 2 months before he died. Maybe you'll send an email to some important person. It'll be what historians use to find out the truth. And I mean, sometimes people just tell you. Our show is not to look at somebody who is alive, but to look at these guys who are already dead, who people maybe debated or not, and people outside of the church, because we don't need a Charles Spurgeon was a Christian, and if he wasn't, boy, he sure pulled the wool over a lot of people's eyes, right? I'm not. This is for all the other guys, the guys who aren't in ministry. We look at history and can learn so much about how to live our lives based on people who lived. But most of the people, and for good reason, are that church history is really important. But what about the guys outside of church history? The people, because most of you listening maybe aren't in ministry. It's cool what Spurgeon did or what Edwards did or Martin Luther did, but you're never gonna nail 95 theses. You're a businessman, you're a veterinarian, you're a dentist, you're working at a warehouse. You need somebody who maybe lived a normal life but was a Christian as well, and that's what I think Christian or Not really tackles.
Exactly. So talking about a very normal, unimpactful life, let's talk more about Newton. No, that's a joke right there, because I was actually surprised we didn't get more comments on us, messing up the
Nobody
science of
cares.
it. Nobody cared
Because
about the
nobody else
science.
knows either. Nobody else can understand. It's too deep for all of us, okay? And the 0.1% of physicists that are probably able to understand it probably aren't spending their free time listening to Christian history style podcasting. Maybe they are, though. Maybe we'll get to them eventually, but
We'll see.
at least there's not enough of them that it was a problem. But Isaac Newton was surprising to me. I expected people to, if they were confused or there was gonna be controversy. It would just be over like, "Oh, but I like him. He has a lot of good writings." What I was not expecting was dozens of Unitarians to start swarming my social media accounts and to follow me from post to post now, complaining about how I'm not a Christian because I'm not a Unitarian like Isaac Newton. Um, I don't mind it. I have no problem when people get mad at me at social media. That's not actually a big deal to me. It's just funny to me because I didn't know Unitarians were still around. Mark, were you aware of the great Unitarian groups that are out there?
I'm gonna be honest with you. I had to look it up what Unitarianism was. And so just we'll show you some of the comments here. So we have these are mostly on X. I see people saying, who would say that a non Trinitarian religion cannot be Christian? Christian is one who follows Christ. Adding onto that to say if you believe in the way of Jesus but don't adopt that he's the same as God and the Holy Spirit, and you can't be a follower is nonsensical. It's the opposite of what Jesus taught. Another one, horrible misrepresentation of the genius that was Newton. He wrote more on the scriptures than you've ever read. I think that it's probably true because he wrote a lot. Although I would probably not agree with what he wrote, because then this comment continues, and he discerned through examination that the Trinity is a fraud not found in Scripture, and he proved it. But I suspect that's evidence we won't see you cover. Uh, I mean, yes, that's true. We won't cover evidence that the Trinity is a fraud because we won't accept that as evidence because we believe the Trinity is not a fraud. I mean, that's maybe a cheap reply there, but I mean, and you notice if you follow Troy on his podcast and you're now getting to know me on this podcast, we're Trinitarian Christians. Um, Another one, Bill Swirsky says, I'm grateful that Isaac Newton rejected the lie that is the Trinity doctrine. All true followers of Christ would be served following his example by worshiping only the Father as the Most High God in spirit and truth. And then John 4:23 and 24. Um,
Do you have that pulled up?
I thought I did, but I don't.
Here, I got it real quick.
So if you can pull that up.
I'll pull it up. I'll read it from the ESV. But the hour is coming, is now here, when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth, for the Father is seeking such people to worship him. God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth.
Okay, yeah, so that's at the woman at the well passage, if I'm correct.
And that is correct. That is the one in the well. I'm not sure how any in context reading of that could possibly tell you that this is not an anti-Trinitarian. He's answering her. If you look at the verses before, she says, the one in the well says, hey, um, he had just called her out for her adultery. He had just said, like, you don't have one husband, you have five. And so she tries to switch gears into a religious topic and goes, the Jews say worship Jesus, worship God in Jerusalem. We say worship him over here. And he goes, yeah, but there's coming a time when God is seeking people to worship him in spirit and in truth, and they can worship him wherever they are. And that hour has now come when God is going to do that. That is not a rejection of the idea that Jesus is God. And her response is to then go out, gather all the people together, say, look at who I found. He knows everything I have. Is he the one we're waiting for? And then everyone comes and believes in Jesus. And they say, at first we heard what you said, but now we believe because we have seen they're seeing Jesus as God. And I just don't think this verse is what he thinks it is. And interestingly, too, um, he's calling out this woman at the well by saying, a spirit. We worship God in spirit and in truth." You see, she was kind of making the case like, "Oh, we were worshiping God. We had we had the right heart behind it." He's like, "Yeah, but also truth. You have to actually know who God is to truly worship Him in spirit and in truth." That goes against almost what this person is saying when you really think
Yeah.
about it.
I mean, yes, and I was thinking about this before, and we're gonna go through a few more comments also by people, and we're saying Unitarianist. We don't know if they necessarily ascribe to being a Unitarian. Like there's different streams there as well, but we'll just call it that, just to keep it simple. And I know the word in Dutch, overzichtelijk. I don't know how you say that in English.
I
But
think we usually say it as
yeah, okay, no, that makes sense. Sorry, the Dutch listeners now know what's happening. Um, but just to give a little intro here, maybe for myself, because we're getting into like theology, apologetic kind of stuff. I'm not I'm not actually used to that as much. Let me just be perfectly honest here. I grew up in a Reformed church. Um, and that was a Trinitarian church, but we didn't call it a Trinitarian church because that was sort of a given. Like that's the basics. Like we're in let's call it Nicene Christianity. Actually, that's I think better way to say it. And all the churches that I've always been a part of were always Nicene Christianity churches. So it was always the Trinity. So I'm not actually used to this argument as much about Jesus not being God. I got a little bit more into it when we were researching Newton. Also before listening to Troy's podcast, actually about also learning about Arianism and all those things. For me, it always just more confirmed me when I was reading the Bible. It's like, no, I really believe Jesus is God and that God is three in one. um, so now being confronted by people that are, of the opposite opinion, and I must admit it feels a little bit daunting. But I must also admit I don't think I'm gonna suddenly be a Unitarianist after going through these things, because that's the thing with these theological discussions, and maybe that's my point. Usually we're pretty, dug into our own position. Usually we think like, okay, yeah, but okay, that's great that you believe that. And that's especially a thing of like the West these days. Like, okay, you do you. I believe what I believe, and we're all, getting along. But I do want to talk about this still. Like, I don't want this to be like, yeah, okay, well, fine. You don't think this is true, and you've discounted Newton for it. I mean, I really believe it matters. I believe it matters that Jesus is God. And just to pull up a different comment real quick here that we got from Jacob Holloway. What you believe about Jesus is truly the most important thing you can have. Was Jesus a prophet, a mere man filled with demons, or was he the true and only Son of God? That is why the gospel is a stumbling block, even for great scientists like Newton. The Bible is clear in John 1, 1. The Word was God. Jesus was never created, but he was begotten of God eternally. God is the unchanging Father, and Jesus the eternally begotten Son, same essence of the Father, same essence as the Father. I mean that's where I'm at. That's
Yeah.
what I agree with. So um, just to say, like we're doing these comment episodes, but I really want to say, like, we respect these opinions. Like, we really want to respect your opinions. But the fact that we're talking about them and maybe saying like, yeah, okay, but we don't agree, like, yeah, that's something that I'm struggling a little bit with. So, Troy, as a veteran of the social media discussions, can you help me out here a little bit to
Sure.
grapple with these
I
things?
take a very different approach. I really don't mind what people say online. It doesn't affect me at all. I have sometimes because when you've been on certain social media sites like a Twitter or what now X for a very long time, and with the way our time zones work, I remember I tweeted. You inspired this, Mark. I tweeted one time, if I walked into church and your pastor was wearing flip flops, what would you do? And it was like 10 at night. I went to bed, but we live on the opposite time zone. And when I woke up, there was 1,000 comments. And people had spent the entire my version of night, the day over there in the east, or in the west, just arguing over it. And it was inspired by you, Mark. And I could have put, "What would you do if your pastor was barefoot?" Because you always do the worship leading barefoot. But it was,
Oh,
it was flip flops, so it was fine. And I mean, it was everything and under the sun. Some people were like, "I would walk out immediately. How would you disrespect the house of God that way?" All the way to, "Well, didn't Jesus wear sandals?" Like, I mean, it was everything in between. These debates and things, they don't bother me, they don't impact me at all. And for the Unitarian, and it's not to say like I don't want to hear good opinions or good arguments. There are times where I'll read something and go, "Yeah, I hadn't thought of it that way." The Unitarians flooded my page, tons of different things, and every single one of their arguments, I thought to myself, I'm now more convinced I'm correct, because the arguments were pretty shallow. They weren't strong. They didn't make the case at all that Jesus was not God. And I gotta be honest with you guys. I thought the 1800s, you guys kind of got quashed again, and I thought it seems like every so often the Arians come back and try to convince us all Jesus was not God, and the arguments are pretty shallow and flimsy and have never really been convincing. That nothing posted, for example, like the worshiping God in spirit and in truth. How on earth does that disqualify the idea that Jesus is God? Like, it doesn't. These are verses that are either out of context or the arguments are not convincing. So the point of our feedback episodes are not to be somebody leaves a comment and we argue with them and tell them how they're wrong. We're going to leave our feedback on the comment, but that's about it. But when it came to the Unitarians, I felt pretty. You can put people in front of me and make arguments like, "I can see how you could see it that way. We disagree, but he has a good point." This is not how I feel about this group of people. I'm just like, "Sorry guys, your arguments are not very strong, and but you did help make the case, which was we said Isaac Newton was not a Christian because he was a Unitarian or at least a rejecter of Jesus as God, and boy, they really wanted to let us know that we were correct. except in their world, Isaac Newton is a Christian and we're all the non-Christians. Even if you were correct, which you're not, the Unitarians are not. In their world view, 99.9% of Christians that have ever lived are all not Christians. And the 0.1% of Christians that accept Jesus as Lord, but not God, are the correct ones. I mean, that is a weird worldview to have anyway. Like, you're the very, very rare fraction percentage. Not to say that majority rules here or anything like that. I'm just saying that to take their position, even if there was merit to it, would to be to really, damn pretty much the entire church throughout history. I just think that maybe if you're in that camp, maybe look back and go, what's more likely? Me
Yeah.
and this rare fringe of people have figured out the secret to Christianity, or that the majority from, Southern Baptist and non-denom Protestant churches all the way to the Catholic monks living in all of these people from very large spectrum, the one thing they kind of have all had in common is that Jesus is a part of the Trinity. What is more likely, that that's one of the uniting things that we believe in as Christians, or that that rare fringe percentage person is the correct one? I you know?
Yeah. I mean, and that's maybe, we're not discussing between the two of us here because I think we're definitely in agreement on this. So, um, thank you for your comments. Still, like I said, like we really want to hear these comments because it makes us think about our own theology, and I think that's always a good thing.
Yeah.
Like it's always good to, think about what you believe and why you believe it.
It's funny because one other comment people would send us, and these are people who didn't listen to the show, they didn't watch it, they just said, "Well, why would I wanna," and they would say something effective like, "Why would I care if somebody's a Christian from 1700 years ago?" Or whatever it is, like, maybe you wouldn't. It's I think, I mean, of all the discussions to have online, of all the things to listen to, I think these are interesting topics, right? I mean, we're
Mhm.
flooded with things on social media all day. I don't know if people have a Lego YouTube channel. Okay, those are kind of cool. My wife will watch people cook random things and stuff like that. I'm like, why would I want to watch that? Just if the recipe's good, it's good, right? Of all the things to do online, talking about people's faith is at least an interesting one. But secondly, I will say that these episodes that we have put out of Christian or Not have received more feedback and more discussion on what makes a Christian than most of the episodes I post on church history. And I think those church history episodes are really good and we receive a lot of encouraging emails, but just watching people argue and put out the gospel and define the gospel has happened more in 2 episodes of Christian or Not than I have seen in many years of Revived Thoughts, where people are publicly telling each other, this is what makes a Christian. No, this is. I think that's a sign that this is probably something we need to do and look through. So I'm very encouraged by what we've seen on that. Um, Wanted to read a comment, by the way. Salvata on YouTube, she responded to the Isaac Newton and said, very interesting things. I would like to know where or how you learned that he did not consider Jesus to be God. Is there a quote by him or someone who knew him that you could read on the show for us? The most interesting thing that I have ever thought of before is that Isaac in the Bible had not caught a single counterfeiter in mind.
Yes.
You're welcome. Again, hard hitting, and I
That's what you
appreciate.
can expect from us.
We're
Yeah.
gonna we're gonna look through, and again, nobody has left a comment showing Isaac from the Bible catching a counterfeiter, so I feel pretty confident we can rest on that. Um, so where it comes from, though, the Isaac Newton line comes from a letter that he wrote to John Locke, where he said, and I pulled it up here, and then I lost it, which is classic. Oh, here it is. Okay, a quote. The quote is, "We are forbidden to worship two gods, but we are not forbidden to worship one God and one Lord." So he's saying that God the Father is God. Jesus can't be God because that would mean we worship two gods. So Jesus must be Lord. The idea that we serve one God in three, he is rejecting and putting Jesus into a different camp called Lord. That is clear as day Arianism. That is exactly what Arius did as well, rejecting that Jesus is the same as God the Father, as the Holy Spirit. And he's saying, nope, he was created as a higher Lord creature thing, similar to God, close to God, but not God. And that's verbatim what Isaac Newton is saying as well to John Locke. So it is a direct quote. It's not something we're speculating on. He did say it.
Yeah. Okay. Next comment. We have a comment that came on Spotify from Danielle. Just proves that being a born again believer and being a creation scientist is two different things. You can be the one without being the other. Newton is relevant to creation science, not Christianity. Thanks so much for the studios. Well, you're welcome. I think that is actually very true. I mean, it is obvious that Newton taught us a lot of stuff that Troy and I don't understand, but he taught us a lot of stuff about creation, actually about the nature of God and how amazing creation is. but unfortunately, and we said this in the episode as well, like it was so close, and it just like what if only he had just had that part where he would have actually believed that Jesus was God. But it doesn't take away from all the amazing things that he did for the world of science and for us to understand creation. So, yeah, very true. Thank you
Sure.
for that comment.
And there are modern equivalents too. I don't we're not trying to speculate on the faith of people who are alive. I don't think that's right to do necessarily. I mean, we do. You come on. That's one for the people who are like, well, why would I ever? There were people who would leave comments like, well, you can. Why would you ever try to guess someone's faith? I'm like, so you don't. You have children, but you don't ask the question whether your children are believers or not. Like you have parents, but you never wonder. I have a hard time believing because that would tell me you're not praying for them, right? I mean, obviously, we want the people around us to be saved. We do spend time asking the question whether someone is Christian or not in our own life. I think it's okay to do that as well. We try not to do it with people who are actually alive, as we mentioned, but I can think of modern equivalents, and you probably can too, of people who have a lot of knowledge of the Bible, but just aren't Christians. I think maybe one example, and I don't know his name, so maybe it's fair. It is there's a famous atheist who memorized like the entire Bible, and literally you can ask him anything, and he can read the Bible to you. He liked the Bible enough to memorize it, but he's not a Christian. And so I'm like, there's things like that where these people, their knowledge is actually surprisingly strong, but they just don't have a walk with God. And that seems to be the camp Isaac Newton falls into.
Yeah. Okay. I'm trying to look through the comments here. Did we miss anything that we talked about? Did you mention this one? Because I think this is an important comment as well. I think you touched on it just now, but I maybe missed when you actually read out the comment by a person named Service Christie, which I think is a handle. I mean, would be a cool name, but I don't think it's his real name. Time would be better served actually being a Christian as opposed to hunting who isn't. Um, well, yes, I agree. I don't think we're hunting who isn't. Like we say in every episode, we just want to learn from their lives. We want to see about their lives, and we do it with open hands, open minds, and we say we don't know. We don't know. In the end, we don't know if this person was a Christian or not. But we like history, we like theology, so we talk about those things. Um, Hunting those who isn't. Um, I mean, I wouldn't say hunting, but I would say that we would be, like Troy also touched on, like we would be actively looking at our fellow men that is not a Christian, and be trying to reach them with the gospel, be praying for them. So yeah, I wouldn't call it hunting in that sense, but I do think time would be better served being a Christian. Absolutely. I don't think it is opposed to looking for those who aren't. I think it is goes hand in hand that if we have a true faith in God and in Christ, how could we not be sharing that with people? So how could we not be looking out into a world where we see people that are not Christian and, be heartbroken for them and, get up on our feet and do something. So that's my response to that comment. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Troy.
What I was going to add is I realized we've actually covered some of the negative feedback a lot here, just kind of clarifying things. We're not like Matt. If you have negative feedback, feel free to leave it. We're not gonna or nothing like that. But B, I don't want to give the impression that we put the show out and everyone's been mad at us. And I just realized, oh, we've been like sharing the negatives, and that's how it is. You focus on negative things. Um, if I say like 9 nice things to Mark right now and I throw one little bad thing somewhere in there, the one bad thing is what he's gonna take home. So let me just,
Absolutely.
in case you think, "Oh, no, everyone doesn't like Christian or not," we actually have had overwhelmingly positive feedback from just talking to people. I was even on the phone with a big podcaster, bigger podcast than us, and he immediately was like, "What a great show. He gave us the idea for a person that we should cover." But just here are some comments from them real quick. I didn't actually have these on our list, but I found them in our own personal chat. That was what I was pulling up here. Gentle Gentile, looking forward to the series. Keep up the good work. Imperiosa says, wonderful idea. Physics Phantasm, follower of Revive Thoughts for a very long time, by the way. He says, sounds like an amazing show. I'm looking forward to listening to it. Hope you do some on, he mentioned a couple different people we should do, and all the presidents of the USA. He then actually sent us another list later on of like a bunch of scientists that we should cover. So he's been a fan. Ellen over on Patreon. I don't want to give any spoilers for people like me who do not know about Newton, but I agree with your opinion and conclusion. So interesting. Thank you very much. Chris over here says, I've been listening to Revive Thoughts for quite a long time. This new series continues the tradition of looking up people from history and explaining their influence to today's audience. Another excellent episode from Revive Studios. Ben listened to the show and found out about it. Says Constantine would be a great case study for this show. Hey, We have some good news for you, Ben, if you think Constantine would be a good
Mhm.
recommendation. I did a research paper on his life a few years ago, came away pondering. Also, it's about time Troy upped his game and brought in a Dutchman to co-host.
I mean,
So there you go. I got to be the Mike Winger, but I get to up my game by having you here with me.
thank you, Ben. We were all thinking it for all these years. No, no bad word about Joel, and we love him. And
Yeah, Joel's great.
yeah, so it's just that he doesn't live in Indonesia, so he
Yeah,
can't sit in a room with
can't
Troy.
come in the room with
Yeah,
me. And he also has real missionaries in real time as other show that he's busy with. So he's got a lot on his plate. And this one's nice because it came from a former student of mine who found out about this show through my running app Strava. Who he says, EA Song says, loved it. The Newton episode was pretty uncontroversial. I'm waiting for an episode where you and Mark disagree. Which I think is very funny because it was so much more controversial than we ever expected it to be. But I agree. But making the case, the guy's not doesn't believe in the Trinity. It's not very controversial when you think about it. So that was just a few I pulled up real fast, just in a chat that I'd sent to Mark to kind of show him some of the positive things we were receiving. So if you're hearing this and thinking, "Oh no, nobody likes the show. Maybe the show is a bad idea." Like absolutely, 8 out of 10 comments are positive. 1 out of 10 is neutral and the other 1 out of 10 is negative. And to be honest, that's just making anything at any point. You're never going to create a show that everyone loves. So we don't take it personal at all. But I just wanted to make sure if you're listening that you weren't going, oh, wow, they've really been receiving a lot of heat. The overwhelming response has actually been something to the effect of, oh, about time. Why has this show never been made before?
yes. So thank you for all the support. As we're going through these comments, I think I have one closing one that I want to do about Newton, because this was also, I've just found it in our chat indeed, which is a person who responded actually 2 times because I saw it later, but that's maybe just an ongoing X discussion at that point. He said, very strange that someone who understands church history would have a problem with Isaac Newton being a Unitarian. Seems like you would have more of a problem with Christians who persecuted Unitarians, forcing people like Newton to keep their unorthodox views quiet. I don't know if this person actually listened to the episode, but I know for sure that I actually mentioned this, that is actually a sad thing to me, that he lived in such an environment where he couldn't actually be open about it. So there was no room for, people to talk with him, to sit down with him and be like, okay, what are your arguments? What do we think? What do you think? In a sense, I agree with this person that the environment that he was in, where it was so strict and where he was basically fearing for his career, maybe even his life, for his views, is unhealthy. That's I don't think a good Christian thing to do, to force your views in that way. So it's called MS is his X handle. So yeah, in a sense, I agree with that though, that he says like, yeah, they kept him quiet.
But I would also point out that I think we know church history pretty well. We embrace the idea that Isaac Newton is a Christian, not a Christian because he rejects the Trinity. But I also agree with you that I think it's a weird thing that'll happen for the next, and that's why we're gonna have lots of material from that era where there are a lot of people who outwardly they're like, yeah, I go to church, but they clearly live lives that don't align with it. The Bible says that will happen. Jesus was very clear, there will be tares among the wheat. There will be people who, call on me, Lord, Lord, didn't I? And they weren't really. So it's not surprising to find that, but I also agree if you were throwing somebody in jail because they weren't a believer in the Trinity, that you shouldn't have done that and shouldn't do that. I don't think that's a common problem anymore. I think that was a problem. If it was a big problem for an era, it is. We've moved quite long past that era.
I mean, we've moved now to discussing this on podcasts and on X and on
And
social media.
feeling quite
So,
free to do that. So we moved on.
yes, so that's a good thing. Okay, I think that covers all your feedback on Newton. Thank you so much. I don't think we're going to do feedback on the feedback episodes.
Yes.
So we're still open to your feedback. But,
Feel free to leave comments and and maybe if a really good one comes through, we might read it somewhere, but I think we won't be. So don't did we get it right? Put it in the comments below, but the feedback on feedback comment episodes may not be happening.
No,
Maybe
no.
it'll be a short.
maybe you just get Troy shouting at you or something. No, that's a joke. He will not shout at you. He'll be very gentle.
Talking in a stern voice.
Okay, in a stern voice. That is. The second episode 2 that we put out was on John D. Rockefeller with a great intro from Troy. I remember that one still very vividly. And this one's interesting because we landed on a yes. Like there's just simply to us, was there no evidence really that he wasn't? Um, and most of sort of the controversy surrounding him that we pointed at was from his son doing some things that were not very
Yes.
Christian. So that's where we landed on. But we got some comments just, to help us rethink maybe. So let me just start here with the first one from YouTube. Someone commented, Rockefeller helped promote liberal Christianity in North America. Look no further than his my English is getting worse and worse. I'm sorry, Ben. You were excited for a Dutchman, but now his English is falling apart.
You're just adding authenticity. It's good.
Okay, that's it. Yeah. Look no further than his support of Harry Fosdick, his massive donations to Riverside Church, and donations to seminaries like Union Theological Seminary. And then actually, I think this connection to this man named Harry Fosdick gets mentioned again by Chris Galinek on X. He was a substantial supporter of Harry Emerson Fosdick's radio program that broadcast and popularized liberal Christianity in the 1930s. I'm gonna need your help here, Troy, because I have no idea who Harry Emerson Fosdick
You're
is.
lying. Everyone knows. Everyone plays a little Fosdick in the morning as they're getting ready for work or whatever. Come on now. What? So in the early 1900s, and in America, there is a explosion of progressive kind of Christianity. In Europe, that had already kind of begun in the late 1800s in a lot of places, especially in England and France and Germany. It had really taken off. By the time that Bonhoeffer is doing stuff in the 20s and 30s, I mean, progressive Christianity was considered like the conservative alternative. There wasn't really no conservative Christianity at all at that point. Uh, and there became a big battle between the fundamentalists and the progressives. But look, we're not going to the point of a feedback episode is not to dig into a gigantic controversial church issue. Harry Emerson Fosdick was on the more progressive side. He pushed the idea that Christianity was about social gospel issues, and that the church had, and the church, these people. I'm going to putting this in the best light possible. I am not a progressive, so I don't agree with some of these things. But if we're putting it in their perspective, the church had gotten so into being the heart and hands of Jesus in their own churches, but they had stopped being the hands and feet of Jesus doing good works around the world. Now, that sounds really good on paper, and you might even say, I look around the church, and I think that's still true today. The problem is they got so into being the hands and feet that they oftentimes would leave out the Jesus part altogether. In the Presbyterian church, for example, J. Gresham Machen pointed out that they were sending missionaries to feed and help the hurting. They weren't even allowed to share Jesus, and they weren't trying to. So, but they were like, oh, well, we're filling the command to feed the hungry. He's like, but you're not giving them the gospel. And that became a huge issue. He ended up. So did Rockefeller help Fosdick get on the radio? And did he help with some of these seminaries that were not good? And the answer to Iraqi immigrant on YouTube, I don't think I don't think that was his born name, but yes, you are correct. But to give and again, we're not here to fight with you, but to give you the kind of opposite perspective too, Rockefeller had money in so many places. He also was funding the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary in Louisville, Kentucky. He also was funding the Atlanta Baptist Female Seminary that became Spelman College. He also helped fund the University of Chicago as a Baptist institution. Like, he was funding these progressive Christian elements. He was also funding these other Christian elements. I don't know that he knew where all his money was going, and I don't think he was a theologian. I think he looked at it and said, "Christian, good, give him money." I'm not sure that he understood, and you could get on to him for that. Like, a lack of discernment is bad, especially when you are supporting these big causes. But again, I can't be wrong. My opinion on this would be, I think it was a lack of discernment more than I don't believe in Jesus, and this is a way of subverting Christianity. And it's also important to note that progressive Christianity, oftentimes, I would argue, is a worse type of Christianity. I think it can be very bad, but a person who loves Jesus but is a progressive is not a Christian. And a part of me hurts the heart. Maybe a little part of me is like, it kind of feels uncomfortable to say that. But if they love Jesus with all their heart, mind, and soul, they accept the word of God. Their being a progressive does not there will be some progressive Christians in heaven. Do I think that's the best way to follow God? I personally do not. That's why I'm not a progressive. But I'm not going to put a standard on, what makes a Christian that the Bible does not put on what makes a Christian. And the Bible does not say, love the Lord your heart with all your mind, soul, and strength, and do not be a progressive. Like, that's not what the text says. So Rockefeller, I don't see any evidence he was a progressive. And the fact that he supported some progressive movements alongside other more conservative ones, I don't think that disqualifies him as Christian. Now, did some of those progressive Christian elements go on to harm things? I think some of them did. But again, also being a progressive does not make you not a Christian. And we have to be careful that we don't put political fencing and structures over the gospel, because we can argue whether those are good things or bad things, but we can't put that fence over and say because he was a progressive, he thus is not a Christian.
Okay. Well, thank you, Troy, for that that
Glad I could
little help there. Glad that you could help. Okay, so that answers that comment. Let me look here. I think this next comment actually goes a little bit into sort of like his business practices. So, Salvador ex gracia uh, response. If I remember correctly, he used his donations to get his people on boards of colleges and medical schools to influence their decisions. If this was the case, his donations were a long con to get done what he wanted and in a prestigious way, not a low class snake oil salesman like his dad. If he said he owed his dad a great debt for how much he taught him, that raises questions for me. And like you said at the beginning, if he is giving all his money away to organizations, they aren't going to say negative things about him. If his father and grandfather were terrible people and his son was a terrible person, was he a saint in the midst of wolves? Or was he better at being a con man than them in a Christian world? Hard to know what to think about him. There's a lot there, yeah. I mean,
To be honest,
yeah,
great points. These are, sometimes some of the arguments we get on here, and I go, yeah, you know what? I dismiss. Like the Unitarian thing, you're not, you're making my case for me of why he's not a Christian. These are excellent points. Um, I don't want to dismiss them out of hand. I don't want to say like, well, here's why all of these things are wrong, or I actually think these are in a lot of ways, the crux of the matter that we need to wrestle with.
yeah, I agree. And I think actually the last line, I think that's where I'm landing on with you as well. Like, okay, yeah, it's hard to know what to think about him. That's what yeah. In the end, we don't know, and that's what we say every episode that we do. In the end, we don't know. We just look at the things that we can find. Yeah, you make some good points here that I think are at least questionable.
If I can
Yeah,
answer to the best, and this is just me speculating, so we're way out here in speculation. Did he use colleges and medical things to influence things his way? Yeah, I think he probably did. Does that make you not a Christian automatically? No, it does raise some ethical stakes of what you're doing, but any business will try to get the people that like them the most to support. Like that is a business practice, whether or not it's a good one. Is that's not it'd be better if he hadn't, but I don't think that would automatically disqualify him. As for his father and grandfather, they were pretty actually, we don't know if I recall correctly, we don't even know what his grandfather did. His grandfather just showed up with money and a fun time and then disappeared. So to say his grandfather was a con man is actually not quite right. Wild Bill, I think his name was no, that was his dad. The dad was Devil Bill. I don't remember what his grandpa was, but his grandpa just showed up, had fun, and disappeared. So he wasn't exactly a con man, but his dad was. And you weren't the only person who said this. We did have a couple people say he was a con man like his dad. We don't wanna put the sin of the father on the son, right? Just I you probably know people who were raised maybe you were raised with some bad parents. You're not your parents, right? And Rockefeller, I don't wanna say he was a con man because now he did say, "I learned a lot from my dad," but I got the impression I learned how to see through tricks, and I learned how not to be conned in the future. Not, I learned how to con people from my dad. And if we're gonna give him, a little slap on the wrist for his dad, let's also remember his mom was a very faithful, love the Lord kind of woman who was very strong about raising her son in the church, probably so she didn't end up like his dad. And so if we're gonna give him a slap on the wrist for his dad's lack of faith, we should note that his mom was far more present in his life and was very faithful attending church throughout her entire life and for, making sure her children did as well. So I wanna give him as much of the benefit of the doubt there as he can. You are right, though. There is a degree where his institutional money was so big, there's so much propaganda out there from his own people that will never fully know the truth. But the fact there is a little bit too, and maybe this was just a part of his business con per se. A lot of rich people, famous people didn't care if you thought they were Christian, you know? The fact that he does care so much, the fact that he did want you to know that he had a faith in God is something. It could be just a part of his charming, I wanna trick you, I'm just a nice friendly Christian guy. But the other business robber barons weren't necessarily doing that. I didn't see that the other big titans of industry were trying to go out of the way to show he was a faithful attender of church. I mean, you can attend church and not be a Christian, but for 40 years, he ran the Sunday school while running some of the biggest industries in the world. If this was all part of a big con, it was very successful. And you did it because you did make me go, there seems to be something there. And that's a lot of work.
Yeah, I agree. We have another comment here from Steve Cook. If only because of how vilified he has become, I tend to lean towards him being Christian. I mean, there's not a lot I can say about that. I mean, it is sad, but I think we touched, and Troy especially touched on this in the episode as well. A lot of it is because his son and the things that he did in the name, using the name Rockefeller, really going towards like this liberalism. And yeah, so yeah, the same way we can't have his dad, blame John D. Rockefeller for what his dad did, we can also not blame John D. Rockefeller for what his son did. Although I think there's a little bit more influence from father to son there as well. We're not going to be talking about that right now. Thank you, Steve, for commenting. And then we have one more comment by someone going by the handle Fraser.
I like this one. Not because his name is similar to mine, because we actually spell it differently. Z versus
Yeah.
S here.
But this is right up Troy Street. He loves a good, a good leaning towards conspiracy theory kind of thing. So Fraser says he was part of the world power system. Oil is a scam. There was free energy before he was even born. Cars can run on water, right? Oil medicines are history, all fraudulent. Troy,
But no, he has.
take it away.
There was a second
Oh,
comment
wait.
where he says, "Just one of a million examples of how we've been lied to. When I was a kid, my dad paid good money to have our lawn sprayed to get rid of dandelions. Dandelion benefits roots, great for digestive health. Roots as a liver tonic and stimulate bile production. Leaves high in potassium. Leaves act as a potent natural diuretic to help flush out excess fluid. Flowers packed with antioxidants and polyphenols. Flowers help reduce inflammation." And I guess kind of the argument was like petroleum fertilizer, which was popularized by the Rockefellers, got rid of these things. And you'll see this, they go around TikTok, they go around Instagram, they go around YouTube shorts, this kind of idea of like, we were all healthy. And then the Rockefellers showed up. And I'm going to be willing to say maybe there's some truth to that. Maybe some of the things we are spraying on stuff is bad. And maybe we do need to be a little more all natural. I would argue that agricultural production has, quintupled since the 1900s. So we're doing something right, clearly, but also obesity and stuff is bad, and a lot of our food is not super healthy. So I can see here's the thing: that petroleum fertilizer came out years after John Rockefeller had died. So if you're mad at Rockefeller because he killed dandelions in your yard, you're mad at his son or maybe his grandson. You're not mad at him. He had no part in killing the dandelions in your yard. He was, I looked it up, he was dead for about 5 years before the Rockefeller money ever got into fertilizer. And even if he had been alive, he would have been like 98. So I don't think he was personally overseeing the fertilizer production. That has nothing to do. As for oil being a scam and there was free energy before he was born, I'm currently reading the book Moby Dick this summer, and I don't know if you know this, but the way they got oil before the oil that we use today, it was by killing whales with harpoons. It was exhausting, expensive, and extremely difficult. And people would get on boats and sail all the way over to Indonesia or all the way up into the Arctic coast, kill whales, like de-oil them. It would take years. You would get on a whaling expedition in the Moby Dick, the book, he goes away for 3 years to come back with enough money to live. And it was exhausting, it was expensive, boats would sink, the whales would destroy ships. That was the amount of effort it took to get oil before it just started springing from the ground with the oil. I don't think it's true to say that oil is a scam and energy was free beforehand.
Well, I think the point this person is trying to make here is that there was other energy besides oil. And I've heard this one before, that they were manufacturing electric cars, or like inventing electric cars at the same time they were inventing the combustion engine, but there was just more money to be made with the combustion engine. I don't think, maybe I'm wrong here. Maybe Troy really wants to go deep into the conspiracy well here. I don't think that's what our purpose is here right now, to go through these comments. The only thing I want to say here, because he said, this person Fraser says he was part of the world power system, oil scam. I do think money corrupts. I do think, being a good Christian with a lot of money is really hard. I think Jesus says this as well when he talks with the young man. Um, but that for me actually only really sort of speaks towards John D. Rockefeller's character in the way that he did deal like he did some things, he was a shrewd businessman and he might have, hurt some people along the way when he was building his empire, his business empire.
Which, by the way, he
Yeah.
would kind of point to the fact that he had a kind of heart change moment too in his middle age, where he was going to church, he was following, he would have, I think he would have considered himself a Christian, but and it was, I think it was his 40s or 50s, he had a real life changing moment where he had realized he had made money his god. So even Rockefeller would agree with you that there was a time where I was overwhelmingly possessed by the love of money,
Yeah.
and then he stopped being that way. At least
Yeah.
that's his argument.
So to me, that's just another plus towards the yes that we already mentioned in the original episode. So I think that's it. Troy,
We had
Matt,
one
you
more
have
here.
Oh,
Will
one
on
more.
Spotify said, "I view Rockefeller in the same way that I view most others that subscribe to a progressive kind of Christianity. I hope they have a saving relationship with Christ, but it doesn't always seem to be in the forefront. I hold this view for Rockefeller due to his relationship with Harry Emerson Fosdick, but just as Wilson and Machen maintained a relationship with one another, Rockefeller's cordial relationship does not mean that he didn't know Christ." Exactly right. Progressive, and also, by the way, fundamentalist Christian, anybody Christian, your relationship with Jesus is what matters most. Sometimes the label we put in front of Christianity becomes too important, and it can be hard to see whether that person did or did not have a relationship with Christ. And that is always a shame to us as Christians when we let something become more important. But it doesn't mean you don't love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. And Rockefeller, I think we certainly wish the best for him and hope for him, but I also think there's more evidence in the positive camp, at least for me. And having gone through the feedback, having seen the comments, we do appreciate all that you left. And I think you guys did a great job of bringing up all the points. Some of them were the ones I expected. Some of them I didn't know about the Harry Emerson Fosdick relationship. So I do appreciate that aspect of it. But I didn't feel like I got moved over out of the Rockefeller was a Christian camp. I still feel like the evidence is more supportive that he was, and he wasn't, but maybe you're listening and you disagree.
And I think I'm in the same spot. But thank you still for all your comments. Like we said, we learned a little bit more about some of his things that he did about progressive Christianity. So that's it. There's our rundown of the comments for Newton, for Rockefeller. So please leave us more comments on the episodes that are coming out. Francis Drake is out already. You can listen to that. Great story. It will feel like you've been around the world once you've listened to it. And then I think we have Charlemagne lined up.
Charlemagne.
Yeah, and that's not entirely uncontroversial either.
Oh yeah, Charlemagne's a big one. We're excited for that one to go out. I think after that it's Mozart. We have a president coming up. We have one of history's most famous writers coming out. And then we have history's most famous explorer. I think. Well, no, maybe Christopher Columbus is
Second or
one
third.
of the most famous explorers though coming out. So there's a lot of good stuff coming this season. Leave your comments on the other episodes so we can share them on future feedback episodes. I honestly, this part of it is probably one of my favorite parts of this show is that we have a place for us to talk and hear each other's ideas. That to me is one of the greatest parts of doing Christian or Not is that I get to see what you guys think and talk to you a little bit more directly.
Yes, so keep harassing Troy on social media and just leave me out of it.
too.
No, I'm actually not on social media. You cannot find me there. So just leave it all with Troy. But thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in for this feedback episode of Christian or Not. My name is Mark.
And my name is Troy. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you leave comments. Do all the 5-star stuff. Everything that every show needs to survive. We need them, and even more so.
See you next time.